All right. Well, hello and good morning. It's Tuesday morning, and we are here to share with you our new online broadcast, Repeatedly Revised. And this is hosted and sponsored by Revision, which is a company that's really geared to encouraging, empowering, and inspiring women. But in this particular broadcast, we're going to steer away from developmental coaching and helping you to develop yourself professionally and personally. We're going to steer it a little more personal, and I'm going to share from my own perspective. Just some of the things that I feel like I'm learning and some of the lessons I feel like God is teaching me. So this is definitely a faith-based broadcast, and we want to share with you, like I said, just a very real perspective on what we feel like um, God is showing us and what He's teaching me specifically as I grow and revise myself as a woman, as a wife, as a stepmom, as a business owner. God's always teaching me something, and that's really the thought process behind the name Repeatedly Revised, because I feel like God's always teaching me something, and I'm constantly being refined and revised and made new for Him. So today I want to share with you out of the book of Joshua in the Bible, which is in the Old Testament. And we're going to be looking at scripture from chapter 3. And so let me basically set this up for you. The Israelites, which were God's chosen people in the Old Testament, they had been living in bondage with the Egyptians and under the rule and in bondage and slavery with the Egyptian nation, and they were set free using a powerful man that God chose named Moses. And he set them free and was supposed to be taking them to a land that God promised was going to be set in place for the Israelites. And through a lot of human error and mistakes and trying to do things their way, they ended up in the wilderness, and they kind of wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. Anyway, and Joshua became the new guy in charge, and God appointed him to lead the Israelites into the promised land. And so when we start the book of Joshua, that's where we start in the story. We start with God saying, Joshua, you're the guy. You're the one that's going to pick up this leadership position and move forward with the Israelites, which I can only imagine how incredibly uh, crazy that must have been, the feeling of stepping into someone's shoes like Moses to do such a big job, like lead the Israelites into this promised land that God had set aside for them. So in the process of doing all of that, Joshua had to take the Israelites out of the wilderness and lead them to this new land, and they had been wandering there for 40 years. And so let me ask you, have you ever felt like you've wandered aimlessly, without direction, without really knowing what you're doing or where you're going, or how to move to the next step? I know I've been there. I say in some aspects of my life I'm kind of there right now, but I believe, and I'm claiming, that in 2016, we're going to move from the in between status, and we're going to move forward into what it is that God has for us, our own personal promised land. And I'm claiming that for 2016, and I'm claiming it for you as well. So, what I'm sharing with you today is kind of my own inspiration to keep moving forward and to take the steps in a way that God would have me take them to get where I want to go. So we've all set goals, we've all set resolutions, we've all said, hey, this year I want to fill in the blank. But how do we actually do that in a way that really does take us forward, that takes us where we want to go, and that honors God? And so I'm going to share with you just some wisdom I feel like the Lord shared with me in Joshua chapter 3 about moving from in between. So the Israelites were in this in between status. They were stuck there. They were stuck having to wander the wilderness, not getting where they were wanting to go. There was some suffering. That was uncomfortable. It really wasn't where they were meant to be. And I don't know about you, but when I'm in places I'm not meant to be, it's frustrating. I have to work really hard. I have to toil and suffer and push and just really go the extra mile to try to make anything work. When I'm not in that wilderness and I'm not spinning my wheels in sort of that dead zone, things happen a lot less effortlessly happens effortlessly. So anyways, I know that God is using me, and I know that He's blessing me when I'm where I'm supposed to be. And so that's where the Israelites wanted. They wanted to be in the promised land. That's where God decided and designed and put together for them. That was their spot. That's where their sweet spot, where they were supposed to be. And so the wilderness was uncomfortable. The wilderness wasn't where they were meant to be, and that in between feeling is just miserable. And if you're in that spot right now, or have been in that spot right now, it is miserable. And I know you feel that. And so I want to share with you some hope that, first of all, you're not the only one, and secondly, the Israelites came out of it. You can too. So I want to share with you just a couple of principles that we find in chapter 3. And so basically, what's happened is in chapter 1 and chapter 2, we read about Joshua taking over the leadership. We read about the Israelites backing him and saying, "Yep, we'll follow you." And then Joshua starts to prepare them to move out and to move forward. And in chapter 3, we see Joshua tell the leaders of the Israelites that they're going to start taking steps out of the wilderness. And he tells the priests specifically, when you see the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord your God being borne by the Levitical priests, set out from where you are and follow it. And so these are the officers, the leaders, the guys in charge under Joshua, telling the Israelites, hey, when you see the Ark of the Covenant, you pay attention, get up and follow it. And so the Ark of the Covenant was this gold-plated box, or this gold box that was designed by the Israelites to encompass lots of things, but one of the things that it stood for and it held was the Spirit of God. And so that was really powerful, and it was a very big visual for them to say, yep, this is God, this is where we see him. And so that was a great icon for them to follow moving forward. So the first thing we see is Joshua saying, hey, listen, we're going to move. I'm telling you guys, my little sub leaders, to go tell everyone that when they see the Ark of the Covenant, to get up and to go. And then he tells the people to sanctify themselves. And in verse 5, he says, Joshua says to the people, sanctify yourselves. That is to separate yourselves for a specific holy purpose, because tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. So he's already forewarning them that, set yourself up in the right place, get yourself prepared spiritually, because God's going to do something for you. And so he ends up telling the priests to take up the Ark of the Covenant and go throughout the people so they can see it and they can follow it. And then he moves forward and to tell the priest and to tell the people carrying the Ark that God told Joshua, that when they got to the Jordan River and they put their feet in the water, that God would cause the waters to part so that they could cross the Jordan on dry land. So what I find really interesting about this is the Jordan River was a big river. In fact, if you go on reading in chapter 3, it says that the Jordan had overflown its banks throughout the time of harvest. So at the time that the Israelites come up on this river, it's overflowing. It's overspilled the banks. So it's not just its normal sized river, it's expanded. And so this is a huge obstacle for them that stands between the in-between and the promised land, and they have to cross that. And so Joshua tells them, hey, God told me that if you guys stand here with your feet in the water, that the waters will part and that we'll be able to cross on dry land. And this should have been something somewhat familiar to them, because if you know the story of the Israelites and you know the story of Moses, you know that when they fled Egypt, they stood at the Red Sea and God parted the sea for them then to cross over into safety. So this is a recurring thing in the New Testament. But still, I mean, you're standing at this big obstacle and they have to have the faith to know that God said, yep, put your feet here and you're going to move forward. And so they do, and then the waters do part, and they're able to cross over across the Jordan River. And when they get there, the very first verse in chapter 4 says that Joshua told them all to gather stones, and they created an altar, and they celebrated and they worshiped God and gave thanks for his deliverance. So what does all of that mean for us? And what does all of that mean for us in 2016? Well, a couple of truths that I think are really powerful. Again, the Israelites were in this in-between status for 40 years. And Joshua tells them a couple of things to prepare them for the promised land. And so the first thing that he tells them is the expectation. Joshua 3:4 says, yet a space must be kept between you and it meaning the Ark of the Covenant, about 2,000 cubits by measure. Don't come near it, but be able to see the ark and know the way you must go, for you have not passed this way before. So a couple of things I love about that scripture for us. Number one, Joshua told the Israelites to be looking, to be expecting to see the ark. It wasn't a, hey, maybe someday you'll get to see it and we'll move ahead. It was, get ready, be expectant, have the expectation that you're going to see the ark. And then when you see it, get up and follow it, because you don't know this route. You've not been this way before, and you need this to lead you. For us, I love that, because to me that says that, number one, I have to be expecting to see God move in 2016. This isn't about sitting back and wondering if it's going to happen. This is about expecting that it's going to happen. And when I see it happening, to get up and follow it, not weigh the pros and cons, not sit around and think about maybe I should do this or maybe I shouldn't do it. It's to get up right then, to get up. Don't wait. Get up and follow it. And to follow it and not run ahead and try to do things on my own, but to follow it because I've not been this way before. And I love that. There's so much in that one verse for us, but the expectation is huge. We're looking for it. We know to get up immediately and follow it, because we haven't been this way before. We don't know where God's taking us, and following Him is really the important piece. So for us in 2016, and where you might want to go, and moving ahead and getting in that in-between, or out of that in-between zone, it's super critical for us to be looking for God to move, to get up and follow Him, and then to follow Him instead of running ahead. I'm super guilty of running way ahead of God with all of my ideas and all of my best intentions, only for Him to kind of pull me back and say, no, that's not what I asked. I asked for you to follow me. Next thing we see is the preparation for what God's going to do. And in Joshua 3, verse 5, Joshua says to the people, sanctify yourselves. That means set yourself apart for a holy purpose. For tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. And I love that verse because there's, again, great things in it. Number one, the Israelites were expected to prepare themselves for what God was going to do. Joshua said, the Lord will do wonders among you, but prepare yourself. So we can't sit around and wait for God to do something and then decide, okay, I'm going to get it together. I'm going to prepare myself. I'm going to better myself. I'm going to get spiritually ready once we see Him working. No, it has to come before. We have to be expectant, and then we have to be prepared. So what do you need to do to prepare for the wonders God's going to do for you in 2016? That might be getting into a Bible study. It might be reading the Bible more, praying more, getting involved in a church, working on your own heart. If you look for the areas that you should be improving or that you should be preparing and sanctifying, God will definitely make those known to you. But that has to happen. That's part of it. Before the Israelites woke up in their promised land, there was a preparation in place. And before they left the wilderness, this is all before they even left the wilderness. They're still sitting in the desert. They had to prepare. So we sometimes, I think, do that wrong. We want to see movement, and we want to see results of what God's going to do before we get ourselves together. We want to know that it's actually happening before we prepare ourselves. And that's not what God asks of us. He asks for us to prepare, expecting the wonders that He's going to do among us. All right, and we are looking out for it. So we're expectant, and then we're prepared. The next thing is that we have to be patient, and that's never a fun word for us, but it's the truth. But in chapter 3, verse 8, Joshua says, you shall command the priest, and God's telling Joshua this, that you shall command the priest to bear the ark of the covenant. When you come to the brink of the waters of the Jordan, you shall stand still in the Jordan. So the direction was to stand with your feet in the water, not figure out a way to build a bridge, not swim across it, not develop some sort of opportunity to fix the problem yourself. This was a huge obstacle that stood between the Israelites and their promised land. And God was going to work a way out for them. God was going to separate the waters. But we had to, or the Israelites and the priests had to stand in the water and be still. And sometimes I think when we're up against some of our biggest obstacles and trials in life, we feel like we have to come up with the solution. We figure out how to overcome it, to go under it, to go through it, to overcome the obstacle, because we want to get to the promised land. We want to leave the wilderness and we want to move ahead. But in reality, so many times all God asks us to do is to be looking for him to move, to be preparing our hearts, and our minds and our bodies to be used, and for him to use us, and then for us just to wait on him and to stand still at the water's edge. He wanted the priest to just stand in the water. He was going to do the work. And when we try to do the work ourselves, oftentimes we fall short. It's very frustrating. We usually don't get the same result as when God chooses to do it for us. Can you imagine if the priests had built their own bridge, or they built some sort of a raft, or they tried to get across the waters themselves? The results would not be the same. And they would have spent a lot of time at the water's edge doing all of that work and toiling over that struggle and that barrier. But in reality, God had the plan, but they had to stand still. And so, as much as we want to run ahead, and I say this to myself because I am definitely one that wants to run ahead, I'm a fixer. I want to find the solution to the problem and put it in action. But so many times, God's asking for us to just stand still. And so, that's my encouragement for you today, is when you're facing that obstacle and you're facing that ginormous barrier between you and where you're moving ahead to, just to stand still and let God work. All right, the fourth thing that we see, they prepared, or they had an expectation, they were prepared, then they were patient, is that they celebrated. And so what happens is that the priests follow through on faith, and they put their feet in the water's edge, and sure enough, God did exactly what he said, and he parted the waters, and they were heaped up. The Bible says that they heaped up, the waters were heaped up the river, so that they could cross over on dry land. And so once they did that, they celebrated, and they gave recognition to God for what he did. I know for myself, I'm really guilty of trying to put things in motion. And once I do, and I get some sort of sense of success, then I am not necessarily prideful in trying to seek praise, but I just am excited, and I just want to keep doing all the good things that are working. But I don't necessarily stop in the midst of all of that excitement to build an altar and give thanks. And so God told the Israelites that this is, hey, what I'm going to do for you. I'm delivering you to this promised land. And then they took time to stop, to build an altar, and to celebrate what God did for them. And when God tells you he's going to do wonders, there's something to celebrate. When you are expecting to see it, your eyes are opened, your physical eyes and your spiritual eyes are open to take notice of what he's doing. And you're not as apt to blow past all of those things that he's doing. You recognize his hand and you recognize his work, which is so huge. When we're busy and we're going and we're working hard and we're pushing ahead, it's so easy to miss those little things that he's doing. But if we're expecting and we are preparing, we will be able to see those and to give thanks and celebration for those too. And if you read chapter 4, that first verse, when all the nation had fully passed over the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, take 12 men from among the people, one man out of every tribe, command them to take 12 stones in the midst of the Jordan, from the place where the priest's feet stood firm, because they were standing still, remember, and carry them over with you and leave them at the place where you lodge tonight. So they built this altar and they celebrated. But here's the great thing. They just had crossed the river. You know, they weren't settled in the promised land yet. They hadn't built their little houses and moved in and set up their homes and gotten all cozy and then celebrated. They stopped and celebrated that victory over that one obstacle. Wasn't all said and done yet. Yes, they had all crossed, but they stopped right then. They didn't wait. They didn't waste any time to take a moment to thank God for what he had done. And so my question to you is, and you're pushing to move in between in 2016, how are you preparing yourself, and what are you expecting God to do? And are you looking for his movement so that you can get up and follow him? And are you expecting to see him do something for you in 2016? And are you preparing yourself to be ready for whatever he has for you, for the wonders that he has for you? I love that word, the wonders that God has for you. Are you setting yourself up to stand still and be patient for Him to remove the obstacles, for Him to remove the barriers? And then lastly, we're going to celebrate. And don't forget that piece, to celebrate and give thanks to Him for what He has done. I hope this has been some encouragement to you, and to know that the year is soon to come around. We're closing down shop on 2015 and getting ready for 2016. And so I hope you're ready for God to do something big in your life, for Him to use you, because He wants to. Every one of you, He wants to use you, and He wants to work in you. And so that's my encouragement for you today. I share with you our website, which is revisionforwomen.com. Revisionforwomen.com. Go check it out. There's lots of great stuff there. You can sign up for our blogs, you can watch our videos, and you can stay in touch with what we have in store for you as we move forward. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Repeatedly Revise.